Today, I had a great conversation with Dr. Rajni Mandal, a thoughtful voice in the Oakland civic scene and a regular contributor to the Oakland Report, where she covers everything from local politics to community stories. She's also trained as a physician and board certified in dermatopathology with a background that includes Cornell, Duke, NYU, and Mass General. Her journey blends science and storytelling in a way that's both unique and also grounded. And I had a great, thoughtful chat with her about identity, community, and the unexpected ways her path has unfolded. So I can't wait for you to hear it. So thank you so much for doing this. It means a lot. I guess to start things off, could you maybe tell me a little bit more about what you do, what keeps you busy, and like how you spend your spare time? I know you work a lot with the Oakland Council and that stuff, but I guess like other than that, and then other kind of what do you like to do for fun?
Okay, my name is Rajni Mandal, and I trained as a pathologist, a physician, and I'm taking time off to take care of my kids who are 11 and 12. And in the meantime, I'm keeping busy by being involved with my neighborhood and neighborhood safety in my community. A couple of years ago, we had just increased crime in the neighborhood, and so we banded together to try and make our neighborhood safe. But we realized that it's not just our neighborhood, it's a whole citywide thing. And my neighbors appointed me as the person to go down to city council and find out what's going on. So I've been doing that for about almost like 6 to 8 months or so. I've been going to meetings. I've been meeting with like the police officers who are supposed to be in our, are assigned to our neighborhood, meeting with our city council people, speaking up, and trying to encourage my neighbors and other people to come to these meetings as well and speak up.
Yeah, that's
And
really cool. I
yeah, and
guess
spare time, I'm a sci-fi fantasy nerd. I read a ton. I watch a lot of movies and yeah.
yeah, that's really cool. I was reading some of the Oakland Report radar
Mhm.
and it was really cool, I guess. So I know you mentioned your friend, but other than that, could you tell me a little bit more about like how you made that pivot from being a physician to getting more involved with your local community?
Yeah, it just really happened. I'm a social person, so I know my neighbors, and my neighbors know me. It's not just from walking the dog, but I like to just chit chat and that sort of thing. And we first I started by being a block captain, meaning that I was basically staying in communication with all my neighbors, made sure everybody had everybody's contact information, organizing little donut driveway parties, something like that. And then it just got bigger and bigger to the neighborhood. And so originally it was just me going to meetings. Like, can you just go and figure out what's going on and tell us what's happening? And the more I went to these meetings, the more I realized that most of these meetings were very one-sided. And the people who would come and speak up from the meetings were basically one perspective, which I didn't totally share all the time. And I know my neighbors didn't share, but there was nobody else speaking up from like my perspective. So I took it upon myself
Mm.
to speak up and then increase awareness in my community. I'd email back to my community, then I'd email back to a larger email list and another larger email list. And before I knew it, a lot of people were starting to get aware and involved. And I got involved with the Oakland Report. That is a volunteer organization. Anybody can write for it. And so I thought of it as a way to inform the community even further as to the things that are happening.
That's really cool. So it started off with more of an interest, like I want to be in the loop about this thing, and then it's progressed to more like now you're representing your neighborhood and representing your community and like voicing what you want for
Yeah,
like
and
your
it was
children
really
and like
just it was just from the I want to know what's going on and I want to let my neighbors know what's going on and then to there's a lot going on that nobody knows about and maybe more people should participate in. And that's how it
mhm.
went towards that way.
No, yeah, that's really cool. And it's nice to see how like you're like thinking about the future generation and thinking about how these policies can inform our future in Oakland. And I guess like more on that, what would you say you're most optimistic about as you are like raising your children in the Bay Area, specifically in like California and the America of today? And I guess on the other hand of that, like what would you say concerns you most?
Yeah, in order to answer that question, I have to maybe talk back to my childhood or how I was brought up because how you want to raise your kids is informed by how you were brought up too. It's a big interplay in that.
Mm,
So I was born and brought up in Peru in South America. I moved to upstate New York right before high school. And growing up in Peru as well as in upstate New York, I was the only Indian person, pretty much, in my
mm.
grade, on my block. For a lot of people, I was the only Indian person they knew. And so that comes up with the that it It brings a lot of either pressure because you're quote unquote representing a community. Also pressure to, I don't want to really be the other. I want to be one of everybody. So it brings up questions of assimilation and it brings up questions about identity. So all that, what I experienced when I was younger, I really wanted to make sure that my kids did not feel like they were the other and that my kids would be comfortable sharing their culture and as well as being accepted for it and not being standing out for it like I was when I was growing up. So what in the Bay Area, it's a very welcoming, opening community where people celebrate their differences and people, it's a given that you have a cultural background and experience. Where I was growing up, people would always look at me and be like, "So where do you come from? Where are you from?" And that was like the first or second question that I would get whenever I'd meet people because I didn't fit into their mold. Whereas here, that's not even nobody's ever going to ask you that. So that's what I want my kids to be part of a community that is diverse, part of a community that they can share their culture as well as experience other cultures. And I think that's what this Bay Area, growing up in the Bay Area, is super lucky. And that's one of the positives. I think looking to the future, when you were saying about what are you optimistic about or not optimistic about, I think there's been a big cultural shift from my generation to your generation into acceptance, into awareness. So that's a positive. But I guess the negative is just, as we know, the national undercurrents for immigration, for people who have different skin color, those things they're having a resurgence. And that I would say is one of the negatives.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess more on like your experience growing up as an Indian American kid in Peru. I guess like specifically, I know you mentioned like you were asked a lot about like your background and like sort of pointed out or called out for like your like perceived difference. But I guess like more specifically, what was your school experience like in Peru as like an Indian American student?
Yeah, my parents moved to Peru right before I was born. They didn't know the language. And my sister and I were both born there. And so in Lima, where I grew up, there are maybe about 50 Indian families total in the whole city, which is the capital. So it was a very small, tight-knit group. But that also meant that people didn't know about India. People didn't know about other religions other than really Catholicism. They knew that there was a Muslim religion, but that was about it. And they didn't know about like Indian dress or Indian clothing. It was completely foreign to them. So even Indian food, there were no Indian restaurants down there at that time. So
Mhm.
it was very different because yes, I have the sort of skin color to pass for a Peruvian person, but I don't have the features. So it confused people a lot. And when I was growing up, a lot of the times my friends would want to take me out on a Sunday, and before I knew it, I was in church because they were trying to convert me. So that happened a lot. And where I was growing up, Catholicism it was part of the culture, it's a part of the way of life, and I didn't totally understand it because I'm not Catholic. So there were terms that people would talk about that I didn't know, and I would try to fit in, and I would really stick out even further. For example, First Communion, that is a rite of passage for children to go through and being accepted in the Catholic Church. And I'd go to temple. My parents would take me to a small little warehouse which had an idol that was the temple. And oh yeah, I had my second communion because we go like every week. I was like, okay. And everybody started laughing at me. I was like, I didn't know what they were talking about, but it was a big deal to them. Stuff like that. Or even if I brought Indian food for lunch or anything like that, it was jeered. And so yeah, and even my name. So my name is Rajni. And in Spanish, and even in the United States, it's very hard to say, right? And in Spanish, J is huh. So growing up, my name was not Rajni. My name is Rajni. And I still, whenever speaking in Spanish to somebody, and ay, ¿cómo te llamas? Ah, me llamo Rajni, because in Spanish, that's my name. So the identity, your name is a big part of your identity. And so my identity changes depending on where I'm at. So if I'm speaking to Spanish people, it's Rajni. If it's people from the United States who are not Indian, it's Rajni. And then people who are Indian, Rajni.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I have a similar thing. Indian people will often say my name's Shub. And then like American people who don't, really know how to pronounce it, we'll just be like shoot. And I'm honestly fine with it now because it's like everyone, all my friends do it. So it's just like the easier way to pronounce it for them. And I'm fine with that because I feel like there are a lot of things I can't pronounce either. So it would be way easier for me to pronounce it a certain way. But so I guess, so you grew up in a community full of like non-Indian people. So I guess what was something that like your non-Indian friends always found really like fascinating or cool or surprising about your culture when they like came to your house?
So my house has a lot of Indian art or idols and cultural elements around it. They were always fascinated with the Ganesh statue. What is this
Hmm.
elephant man? Trying to explain that was hard. And then also just trying to explain that culturally Hinduism has multiple idols, and that is very anti-Catholicism. So that was interesting. And then whenever we'd have neighborhood parties, sorry, the Indian community would come to my house for a dinner party or something, right? Everybody dresses up in saris and we're all dolled up. And whenever the guests are leaving the house, there would always be a small crowd of our neighbors who are non-Indian watching because it's the first time and the only time they've ever seen anybody in like Indian clothes. Like, oh my gosh, look at that. Wow. Yeah. So I don't know if they were like gawking, but it was quite an event for them to see us in Indian clothes.
Yeah, and I think honestly, like being surprised about something you've never seen before, I don't think that's inherently bad. I would say a lot
Mhm.
of people say that being like surprised at a culture, like being introduced to a culture is like fundamentally like a negative thing. But I'd say it's pretty positive, like seeing new parts of it, like seeing new things in the world that you haven't seen before, learning about new ways of thinking and like ways of practicing your life, I think is very, very key to one's makeup and like they're growing up and like shaping a worldview and I guess shaping different opinions. So I definitely say that like cultural expression is very important. And I think we're pretty lucky to live in the Bay Area where there's a
Mhm.
lot of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess following up on that question, I guess what would you say is a family tradition that like your parents maybe insisted on a lot that maybe you didn't really like growing up, but now you go back and like you appreciate it?
Let's see. There's a lot that they used to do that I don't do anymore, and I don't appreciate so much. But I think the biggest, for me, it's food. I never realized just how important food was to just feeling at home, feeling accepted, and just having that sense of family. Growing up in Peru and even in upstate New York, my mom made a lot of home cooked meals. And these home cooked meals were everything from, I'm South Indian, so it's dal, rice, yogurt rice, sabji, like that was the basics. But then there was dosas, and mom would make like amazing dosas, like from scratch, right? And I always took it for granted. And then growing up, college, nobody's gonna make you a dosa in college. I went to college, again, upstate New York. There's no dosa places in upstate New York. And then moving to the Bay Area, obviously there are dosa places, but nothing comes close to mom's dosas. So it's something
Mm.
that I appreciate and I've tried to do and I can never replicate. I have like performance anxiety making dosas at home, but it's something that I didn't appreciate so much when I was growing up, and now I really do.
No, yeah, I completely agree with the dosa stuff. Like one of my favorite meals. When did you move? So you moved from Peru to New York for college for undergrad
Yeah.
or
It was in the
graduate?
middle of eighth grade.
Middle of eighth grade. Oh, yeah. I guess so. Like, how was like that adjustment? Because I know, like, you mentioned how Peru didn't have as much of an Indian community as like you would say Bay Area does, and you also said like up the area of New York you were in did not have that much either. I guess how would you compare the two in terms of just the diversity, how you felt culturally, and if you saw people who looked like you?
Yeah, if I saw people that looked like me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I saw more people in upstate New York in my high school. There were only two other Indian kids, and they were both boys. And there's a term ABCD, right? American born, confused AC. They were anti-Indian. I'd try to come up to them, or when we'd have Indian parties and stuff, they were like not wanting to talk about anything about India or not really wanting to talk to me at all. Maybe because I wasn't cool. That's fine. But so I didn't really get an Indian connection in high school at all. And the only time I really tried to assert it was my yearbook photo. I wore a kurta for my yearbook photo because I was like, this is part of me. This is who I am. This is what I want to be remembered for. And then in college is really the first time where I met Indian people from India, as well as a larger Indian population of kids my age who grew up in the US. And it was very interesting for me because the majority of the Indian kids who grew up in the US all knew Hindi, and I don't know any Hindi. So whenever they get together, all of a sudden they were talking Hindi, and I didn't fit in. I kept on saying, "Wait, what was that?" And eventually they just stopped translating. They're like, "Whatever." And then the Indian kids from India were very varied because India, I'd never realized before, is extremely varied. North, south, city, rural, like it's just like the US, there's a whole bunch of different like subcultures, right? And that was something that really surprised me because when I was growing up, we'd go to India every summer to spend time with my grandparents. And the only people I really interacted with were my grandparents' friends, which are like whatever, 67-year-old people, right? And no kids. The only kids I
Hmm.
knew were some cousins who were really older. So I had no idea of what contemporary people from India were like. Because the India that I grew up with was the India of my parents. And for them, India had not progressed beyond the 1970s. And the India that I met that was introduced to me from people who grew up in the United States was also their parents' India. The things that they were focusing on were Bollywood was like a large portion of their cultural identity, which wasn't for me because I never really grew up with Bollywood movies. Bollywood dancing and Bhangra, and those are all things that were not part of my experience. And then I met people from India who Bollywood was not part of their big experiences. There was mostly the people from Delhi and from Mumbai, from Bombay. And they were very cosmopolitan. And I say this with love because I ended up marrying one of them. We met in college. It was a very different experience, and that really opened my eyes to what Indian really means. It's not just one thing, and you can all still be Indian with having totally different experiences and ideas of what that can be.
Yeah, I think the assumption that goes along with thinking about other cultures is that it's one monolithic group of people who all share the same beliefs, practices, like fun things to do. But I think the thing that a lot of people miss and don't fully understand until they're in that position where they're like not like whether they're trying to assimilate into a new group or meeting their like people from their culture is that they haven't seen before is that like these cultures are very diverse. They're as diverse as like American culture, like anything else. They're very different types of people. And there are even like other layers, like you said about not speaking Hindi. That was another layer that went into being with these people and like being similar to these people. So I think those things are often very understated. And I think the more we like embrace unity in areas where unity isn't there, such as like in a very rural area, if you find another Indian person, like stuff like that, I think that is very important to, I guess, also, even if we're different and part of the same culture, it's still very nice to like learn more about that and just share that sense of having someone who's like very similar to you, even if they speak a different language. It's very nice. Yeah, so this is going to be like a fun question. So if your life had a soundtrack, what Indian song and what American song would you be playing during like the key moments of your life?
I'm sorry to say I don't know many Indian songs. So,
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
um, because again, the Indian songs I grew up with were like my dad's Bollywood songs from the 70s. And I don't know Hindi, so I have no
Mm.
idea what they actually mean. I think, let's say, I don't know. That's really hard to say, but I would say one song that comes to mind for me that makes a is actually a Mexican rock band song. The band is called Maná, and the song is Rayando el Sol, which means scratching or outlining the sun. And it's a sad and happy song about trying to reach something and realizing that it may be out of your reach, but always hoping to reach it anyway. So it's about perseverance in a way. So that's what comes to mind right now. But that's a tough question.
Yeah, no worries. I guess so you've talked a lot about the different stages of your life and like the different stages of also your Indianness and like how you felt about your Indianness. So starting off, it wasn't you didn't really get to share your culture with people outside of your family because of that lack of, I guess, other families who are also Indian in Peru. And then moving on to like America, you met more Indian people, but it didn't really feel quite right until that college time period when you did meet a lot of Indian people. So I guess like how is your throughout those changes in your life, how is your view of like your own racial makeup and like your own Indianness been like shifted along with the people you meet?
That's a very good question. And I think it has to do with just how your identity and your purpose of identity grows as you grow as well. In different stages of life. When you're younger, your identity is a lot about your family and about your friends, about your peers, right? You like the things that they like the things. Like you have these shared beliefs and shared values as well as shared likes and dislikes. And so Indianness, as you said, it wasn't a really big part of my life growing up because I wasn't really able to share with anybody outside of my family. I did feel Indian. India was defined by what my family exposed me to be. And then as you grow up, you figure out where you're at. My college essay was about how if that I couldn't choose between Indian, Peruvian, and American. That if there was a Miss Universe pageant and it was those three were the finalists, I wouldn't know who to vote for. If those three were like the finalists in the World Cup, I wouldn't know who to I would root for all three. I couldn't choose one or the other. So all
Mm.
three are really important part of me. And then as you grow up, you grow just as a person and there's more facets for you. It's not just your culture, it's a lot of other stuff. Your identity is tied to your work or tied to your role and that sort of thing. But I think Indianness in itself is still a very big part of me. I look at myself in the mirror, this is Indian, right? A lot of the
Mm.
times when I speak to people in Spanish and they're surprised, I say, yeah, I'm Peruvian by heart, right? Because a part of my heart is Peruvian, but this, my skin, everything else, that's definitely Indian. So it being Indian is always going to be a part of me, but it's not I've realized and accepted that my definition of Indian may not be the same as somebody else's. And that's fine.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's really insightful. I think that people do have a view of embracing one's culture as not very important, or there's no point to it. Like, obviously, you said there's different facets of one's identity, and it's not just culture. And I think a lot of people don't understand like the point of asserting one's culture and the point of expressing one's culture. So I guess asking you like what you think for you, like personally, that would be. So I guess like how has being Indian American been like a secret superpower to you in your life or in your career, like in your family?
I think it's the values that my parents instilled with me, right? It's to the benefit or detriment, right? It's working hard. My family also taught me the value of respecting others, right? Which is great. But also my family taught me the value of doing what you're told. There's rules, and it's a very black and white thing. It's like your dharma karma. It's very black and white. And so those are things that help me succeed, right? And be hardworking, follow the rules, do what you're told, but always strive to be better because that then you will be rewarded later on. So those are very strong values that were instilled with me, and I think that comes from our culture. And then I think the other part of it was just the value of family. So I come from a very large extended family, so family is very it's not just the people who are in your house, and my family is all across the country, not just the country, but the world. That was also a really strong, important part of it. We're all still in touch. We all still, now with social media, it's a lot easier. But the importance of your family not just being your immediate family, I think is also really strong soon.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's very understated. Like having a ton of like random cousins all across the world. And I know this guy in London, like stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool feature to have. Definitely good socially. I guess like we've talked a lot about like your kind of like the intersectionality that comes with like your Peruvianness, Americanness, and Indianness. I guess like how do you feel? Because when me personally, when someone asks me where I'm like really from or something, like all I'm honestly because I like being asked questions and I like talking like telling people about myself. So I'll be fine answering that. But I guess how do you feel about those types of questions? And do you think they're like, do you think they're fine out of like curiosity, or do you think like people should not really ask someone that unless they're really close to them? Or what would you say?
It depends on the context, right? For example, I meet somebody randomly on the tennis court for the first time, right? And I say, yeah, hi, my name is Rajni. Let's say they're Caucasian, right? Oh, yes, my name is so and so. And oh, where are you from? I said, I live here in Oakland. Oh no, where are you from? I grew up in upstate New York. Where are you from?
Hmm. Yeah.
That I think is a little invasive. And again, like, how many more explanations do I need to tell you, and why are you still probing? But
Yeah.
so that I feel that has a negative connotation to it to me, especially with somebody I just met who's continuing to probe. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody and I say, hey, yeah, when I used to live here or there, and then they're like, oh, yeah, so where is your family from? I think that is a more quote unquote politically correct way.
Yeah, I think because I'm actually interested in what people's ethnicities are and like, but I know that there's like a way to ask it without otherizing them. Because if you otherize someone, you're basically, or if you ask someone like, where are you really from, or implying that they are more foreign to the place you're in than you are shaping them as like this like painted other that like this unknown entity that like you need to learn more about. But I think asking more genuinely like questions about someone's culture, questions about someone's family, and just learning more about that's like a more genuine way to show that like you want to actually like you're curious, you want to know.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
difference between asking about somebody from a status perspective
yeah,
than it is
yeah.
from an actual like wanting to learn perspective. And I'll just give you a parallel because in India, I'm sure you've gone to India, at least for me, when I go to the South and stuff, they're not just asking, they're asking me, am I Telugu? And then they'll ask me my caste. And then they'll ask me my subcaste because they want to know where I stand in the whole order. And I get that from just people I just meet who are not really, who don't know me. Yes, there's a different way to ask about culture, and then there's a different way to ask about quote unquote status and the pecking order and otherness, as you said.
No, yeah, totally agree. And I guess wrapping things up, what would you say is like a misconception about your culture or about like you specifically that would make you laugh the hardest? And like, why is it so ridiculous?
Growing up, the only person, like when I was in upstate New York, the only other Indian person on TV was Apu from The Simpsons. And
Mhm.
so that's what everybody would thank you, come again was like the thing that I would hear the most when I was talking to people. So I found that funny because I'm like, if your only interpretation of Indian people is going to be a convenience store person, there's way more to people from India in the United States than a convenience store person. And so to see the rise of Indian Americans in this country, generation after generation, I think has been really awesome. And I would laugh back at those people who used to basically compare me to Apu growing up and say there's
Mm.
way more than that.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I also think representation is really important, like in the media and stuff. And I think Indian people are like uniquely underrepresented, which leads to like overly comedic characters like Apu being like the representation of Indian American or Indian people in general. So yeah, I think that's definitely a really big thing in terms of like stereotyping and cultural knowledge. From your position as like a physician, a mom, a mother, like working with the Oakland City Council, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to Indian American youth in the Bay Area, like myself?
Yeah, I think, and maybe you probably heard this from the other speakers you've had, is be genuine, be present, and participate. I think that's the only thing. Just come and show up. I didn't have any public speaking experience or anything like that before going up and speaking at a city council meeting. And it doesn't matter. Just go up and say what you want to say. You can prepare it beforehand, write it down on a piece of paper, and just read it. The hardest thing is just coming up to the mic.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think because I do stand-up comedy. So I think the biggest struggle for me at first was actually stepping up on the stage and like talking to everyone. But once you do it, and once you're holding the mic and you're speaking, then it's like really just, it's almost like you're not there. Like it's just going on. It's happening. You're just going with the flow. So definitely feels really good. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. It was really good.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.